Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. The topic that set the internet on fire today is what should we all expect given the events that we've seen at Trump's inauguration, his second term in office, and, what the world is about to look like in the next 3 to 6 months. And here with me today, we have Gabrielius Landsbergis to answer some of these questions.
I'm Gabrielius Landsbergis, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania.
Amazing. It's very nice to have you here. I am a bit of a Twitter fangirl, if I can say that without making it very awkward. But now that you know this information, so I'm sure we've all followed Trump's inauguration, which is arguably one of the most important events this week based on, just how many people were curious to see it. And one of the first things that we saw there that went viral online and everyone is talking about it is obviously Elon Musk doing this particular gesture that resembles a Nazi salute. And if you ask me, I would say that that's exactly what it was. Some people are trying to portray it as a Roman salute. Some people are saying it was a to the moon gesture from your heart gesture. I've heard some theories that he was autistically stimming into a Nazi salute, which I mean, is a very far reach in my opinion, but I guess you never know. And while Americans are not taking it nearly as harshly as I guess Europeans are, because we've seen reactions from Germans, we've seen reactions from Israel, we've seen reactions from France, Italy, everywhere. And it seems like the whole world is in agreement that no matter what you implied by this, it is still something
Mhm.
that should never have happened, and that it sets a very dangerous precedent that, a billionaire sponsor could first of all speak on stage of a presidential inauguration where that he should have nothing to do with, but also do these things and get away with them. So what do you think European concerns are watching this unfold and watching this
Mm.
progress in real time, and what kind of signals does it send?
Well, first of all, I think that what we're seeing is a rather big change from the first term, from 16 to 20. And my thinking is that back then in 16, many people, and also in business environment, those business moguls that currently we're seeing around President Trump, they could have seen the election result as some sort of a mistake, right? People did not know what they're electing. That's why you could have stayed in this ambiguous mode, saying, "Look, I'm neither for nor against." We'll just have to see how it works out. And many of them did, right? Kind of not affiliating themselves too much with the presidency. Well, this time around, this is over. Everybody knew what they are electing. So it is a clear choice by American people who chose this president, this path, this rhetoric. And I think that they kind of want to make sure that there's no doubt where do they stand. Um, it's strange because in Europe probably it's not very often that you would see that, and then in United States that prides itself on the kind of republic, the very democratic roots of the country itself is rather strange. But I would probably would think that kind of the alignment is happening, what we're seeing now. When it comes to the gestures, really, I mean, you mentioned a couple of things, and I was particularly amazed or amused, probably more, about the Roman salute. And I almost tweeted the rhetorical question, "What's next? A Roman swastika?" Or so. But I kept it to myself. Um, I mean, it's I've seen this in a bit more different version, but I've seen people who did not know what politics and the scrutiny that you get from being in politics does actually mean.
Mhm.
You're not a pop star. You're not somebody who is just famous for being famous. You are a person who will be judged every second of your life, and your attitudes and your gestures, everything will be scrutinized. And I think that this is a new awakening for this new elite of U.S. administration, where they will have to figure out, what they actually are, and how do they want to portray themselves, and how much of the price of being real themselves do they want to pay. So that's that. And now the last point is that actually what I'm worried about is a normalization of certain things that have been a taboo after the Second World War. I understand that there's the whole movement anti-woke, right? I mean, bringing back the freedom of speech. But then again, the history and world history, especially European history, was marred with some very horrible events in the past that had to do with anti-Semitism and racism and in kind of in my own country that was a very it still is an enormously important topic that I don't think that we entirely grasped the what has happened in our country, who's to blame, what happened, who did it, how should we treat the past. And when you see, and when young people especially, they see people like Musk doing these sort of salutes, they think, oh, okay, it could be interpreted something that is could be accepted in our lives. So for us then to explain that, look, nothing has changed, that part of history is still still as difficult, still as horrible, and we still would like that to be just remain in the past as a fact, it will be way more difficult. And yeah, so it is a very unfortunate thing. I don't know the reasoning behind it, the intention of Mr. Musk, to do that, but it is an unfortunate thing, to
I
say the
mean,
least.
he did it because he could, right? And we know that his politics is very far right. He's endorsed the
Yeah,
he's endorsed the far right party in Germany, which the German
yeah,
government has come out and called incredibly inappropriate, right? He's endorsed basically every far right government worldwide has meddling with
mhm,
the Great British with British politics, his meddling in with American politics, because let's face it, he's a sponsor of Trump's campaign, right? He arguably bought X, which became one of the largest machines for Russian propaganda, but also for Trump's election
mhm,
campaign. There is rumors that he wants to buy TikTok. I personally don't believe them, but it would be in line with what he's doing, because then a
mhm,
billionaire holds a monopoly on two of the largest world's platforms, right? And there is a lot of that going on. And I think that when people say that these things don't matter or that he had a different intention, again, a person with an ounce of education, and I don't mean formally, I mean in general, just
mhm.
education and understanding, knows not to do this gesture, because they know how this
Of
gesture
course.
would be perceived. And also in a speech on stage, it's quite disturbing. I've seen a lot of comments from people in America who are saying only a
Mhm,
European would take that as something offensive. And it's like, no, not only a European would and should take that as
mhm.
something offensive, because it's part of an incredibly horrendous history, and it should stay there. It should stay that way. Now,
Yeah.
if we look at that history, right, you mentioned that it's the era of anti-wokeness and freedom of speech. If we look at Mussolini and if we look at Hitler, that's exactly what they capitalized on to make their populist
Mhm,
promises and populist campaigns and get to power. I think that people very often forget that when dictators came to power, they were not necessarily horrendous right away. They were appealing to the masses, and they were appealing to the masses with
mhm,
similar messages. Government is bad. Our country is tanking because of terrible people in power, and the only change
mhm,
that could be made is through this like one person that's just perfect and does and understands how to fix it. Like for instance, with the case with Mussolini, at first, Italian economy was booming, right? As in, he wasn't creating
mhm,
laws that were deliberately making life worse for people. So in the beginning, for the first
mhm,
2-3 years, Italy was quote unquote thriving, but the path was being laid for him to become a dictator,
mhm,
right? So I think that these types of things are very well, they're incredibly scary, especially when we look at Trump's inauguration and the box seats and who they were given to.
mhm,
We tend to talk about Russia as a kleptocracy and an oligarchy. And then we look at America and how is it different now? Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, every tech billionaire in America was sitting behind Trump. And we're also seeing the shift in policies on platforms of these tech billionaires, like Mark Zuckerberg, who got rid of fact checkers as
mhm,
Trump's presidency was looming. Jeff Bezos, who did not endorse a political party for the first time through Washington Post. And it's very evident that these things are being done as like sort of preemptive pot sweeteners for Trump to fall in line, because that's what they know he would want. And they know that in order to survive him and not get taxed or not get punished, you need to do what he wants to do. That's no longer a democracy when these choices are being made not based on laws, but based on political preferences and political chess play. So this is very, very terrifying. And I guess, when you look at this as a former minister of foreign affairs in a European country, what does that, and in a country that is very close to Russia and has been dealing with Russia for a long time, how does that make you feel to see this happening in America?
Well, first of all, you mentioned Italy, fascist Italy or Nazi Germany. I think that the main thing that we're currently have to distinguish the situations is, I would say it like this: what will determine the direction, the further direction of the events that we're currently seeing is how strong are the institutions and whether they are able to survive or not. It's not the first time a strongman has took over in democracy and democracy survived. These, so it's a test of the opposition. It's a test of media. It's a test of non-governmental organizations. It's a test of institutions per se, like bureaucracies, which maybe are not portrayed in the best light. But now it's their time, right? So basically, can they ensure that there will be enough checks and balances, to leverage that situation? And look, I mean, President Trump assigned quite a lot of executive orders, but there are those who are going to the Congress to be voted upon. And this is the first step where certain checks and balances are kind of tested. Then the institutions who will be implemented. Then you will have media who will be reporting on it. Then it will be so it's still a long journey. And of course, I mean, what if we would start seeing that the opposition is crumbling, the media is giving up on its role. This is where it gets really, really scary. So I don't say that it's time to panic. I say that it's especially for those who might not agree with certain policies, it's the time to do to do your job. It's now your time to make sure that democracy survives, that the checks and balances survive.
Well, I would argue, not as devil's advocate, but let me add to what you're saying. There is already infrastructure being set up for these things to crumble, because if you look at it, billionaires are buying newspapers in America. Jeff Bezos and Washington Post is one of the brightest examples. It's one of the most read newspapers, right? So there is censorship there. Cartoonists are being fired for unflattering cartoons of Trump and what's happening in America. So these things are happening. Then, as I mentioned, X. So when legacy media crumbles or succumbs to the government, we have these days social media, something that we did not have during the Mussolini or the Hitler era. So the situation with TikTok, the TikTok blackout in America, to me seems like a huge hoax, in a sense that I think they were never going to ban it. They wanted to take it under control. So in order for TikTok to come back, obviously, Show True needs to work with Trump. And when TikTok did come back, there were lots of changes. And I have an American algorithm because my TikTok was created in America. I've lived in America for half of my life. So I can also attest to the fact that I don't see any political content, and I'm a political reporter and a political content creator. So when my feed was normally full of Ukraine and, and a lot of different geopolitical moments, now I see crocheting and I don't know, things that I followed in 2020 when I was kind of going through a COVID apocalypse and following a lot of home improvement, So it's this type of thing where it's clearly a little strange that it would change overnight like that, and I'm not being fed any political content whatsoever. I will tell you an even more disturbing thing. I did not see Elon Musk doing the Nazi salute on TikTok once, and it's TikTok. That's quite disturbing because it's
Yeah.
usually where you would see this type of information. So
Yeah.
I think for me, this is like, I fear that the infrastructure is being set up for when the media does start censoring and does start reporting what's more convenient for the government, for people to not find each other and not see each other reporting on this. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a very clear sign of kind of the same media censorship as was happening in Russia. And I really hope, I've been seeing a lot of people trying to bypass that and circumvent that by, saying things on video that are about hair or crocheting or something like that, and standing with a laptop and actually talking about political things and how the American people need to ensure that censorship does not prevail. But it's certainly a very uncertain, very tumultuous time, and with a lot of moving parts, and it's quite scary to watch that, especially knowing
No,
that.
I fully agree with you. I mean, uh, I'm trying to chart a path that is worth walking.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I've did, through my years of work. I mean, even when take Ukraine, right? Almost 90% of the situation where Ukraine currently is was evident to those who were close to Ukraine and closely dealing with the issue 2 years ago. I remember 2023 Munich Security Conference was the first time when it was said that, look, no more big assistance packages. That's it. That's the last one. And that actually was the last one. So, but my point is that in some cases, that the situation is not ideal. It's rather suboptimal in many cases. But how do you not fall into despair? How do you continue working? How do you continue doing? Because all of us have some sort of responsibility. I had mine as a minister. Now I have mine as a independent advocate for for Ukraine and democracy and frontline countries. And if I were to believe that this is it, the fight's over, right? There's nothing that we can do.
Yeah.
Well, it would be very difficult to wake up every morning.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's no wonder that one of the most popular quotes these days among, I guess, well, this is where we get social media is the new media, right? Is that if you were wondering what you should be doing right now, and if you were wondering what you would have done in the 1940s Germany, then congratulations, this is exactly what you would have done because you've arrived at that point where you can change something. No longer, you can no longer wonder because you're in this situation. I wonder this though. So there is obviously a lot of speculation about what Trump is going to do about Russia, what his sort of relationship with Russia is like. And of course, because it's Trump, we can obviously not predict anything. I don't think Trump knows what he's going to do half of the time because he just makes decisions based on what his mood is like today. But there is this interesting parallel that I wanted to draw. So I talked earlier about Hitler and Mussolini, and Hitler was inspired by Mussolini, and they had a short alliance for just a little bit in history until Hitler kind of just went back on it and left Mussolini hanging, right? And people are scared that, Trump and Putin are buddies, to put it in layman's terms. To me, it looks like Putin is the inspiration that did not do things the right way and ended up in a position that he is in right now. What do you think of that opinion?
No, look, I mean, it's a false, parallel. I don't agree with that. It is it is kind of possible, right, that the strong men kind of aspire to certain images, and they see themselves. Orban, inspired Fico, and who knows who inspired what.
To clarify, though,
The point
I
that
don't mean that Trump would be taking over the world. I mean inspiration for how to run a
no,
country. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, look, the reality is that it is not um, Russia's problem in 1990s, right? So it was that it was a country with no institutions and did not allow institutions to build up.
Hmm.
And this is the main issue, right? In Lithuania, we are happy that Even we have some radical parties that are entering government now, right? And we have one radical party, anti-Semitic radical party, in the government as of last year, December. But the belief is that institutions are already in place in 30 years that will be able to hold the line.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me to lose hope now that US is doomed, to become the next Russia, well, I wouldn't subscribe to that view. I wouldn't subscribe to that view. I'm not saying that, history creates very strange paradoxes. And, when one enters an age of uncertainty, who knows what can happen. But when we're talking about, hundreds age, 300 old democracy that has withstood quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be tested, it can be checked how it works. It's not Russia. Lukashenko is a friend of Putin. Maybe Orban. She definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of, well, I don't think the US is doomed because it's ultimately on the shoulders of the people of the United States to either withstand it or to let it slip, right? What I was trying to say more
Yeah.
is is kind of how Trump sees ruling a country, because to me it looks very similar to Putin's kleptocracy in a way.
But that also depends on how the institutions are, functioning. You can sign an executive order in Russia. No court will test you.
Mm-hmm.
In US, there are already, after the inauguration day, there are, tens of court cases against the laws. The instructions that the president signed, right? And in general, I would say that I would trust US courts because the whole system is built on that. This is why the investment flows in. Why US economy has been growing incredibly throughout the last couple of years. It's not because it found new oil or gas. It's because its system works. It's because the businesses who invest, they know that there's the legal basis of your investment, and your money there is as good as anywhere in Europe or in other Western countries, and probably even better. So it gives you hope. Just that simple fact that it is possible to go to court and expect the ruling. Again, my point is that the system is being under stress. There's a lot of disturbance and destruction, and the world is changing and the systems are changing. It is possible, as with every system, that that they somehow might appear unrecognizable after the change. But it's not yet time to bet against US.
Well, I'll tell you, as someone who's lived in the United States and has a lot of friends right now very concerned with this, I feel like this conversation might be a therapy session for them because you're saying a lot
No,
of things.
no. I'm not saying that that I'm not concerned. Of course, take yesterday's president's tweet, right, where he kind of issued an ultimatum to Putin.
Mm-hmm.
In general, my thinking is that Putin will reject it, right? Because if he accepts it, it's framed in the way that Putin is kind of portrayed weak. He cannot he cannot accept being weak. That means that this will flop. This won't work. But this is a step in the right direction. Basically, shows force. It tells for the first time from any Western leader that, look, we can hurt you really bad. We just
Yeah.
chose not to do that. So, what I'm worried about, I'm worried about that this might be the last thing that President Trump tweets in that direction. He might be, that Putin figures out the way somehow to reconfigure the situation. That that we would not follow what we promised. There's so many things that could go wrong with this, as in the past, as during the last 3 years. But then again, when I look at it, it's it's a stronger tweet than we've had, from any Western leader.
Yeah, well, I'm in this difficult position here where I'm both Ukrainian and I've lived in America for a very long time, so I consider both of these places my home, right? And on the one hand, with certain external politics like Ukraine, I think Trump is not that bad, not because he actually has good intentions, but because he's unpredictable and he's kind of like chaos wrecking ball,
Hmm.
right? So this type of tweet to while Biden would be scared to speak to Putin like that, Trump doesn't think about consequences. So I do think that these types of communications and ultimatums are going to be, we're going to see a lot more of that from Trump and a lot more effectively than we did from Biden, because he's not reserved. He doesn't think about how that affects anyone. He just says it. So for Ukraine's sake, it's a very good thing. But as someone who considers America my home as well, looking at, for instance, immigration raids in California and Chicago and in other places, or how hospitals were just ICE was instructed to be able to raid hospitals, it's this sort of like duality where it's really hard to, it's really hard to see this from two separate angles because obviously as a general picture we have this man in power who's unenforceable in a way, right? He thinks he's this kind of deified figure that was chosen by God to make America great again, or saved by God to make America great again, and he rolls with it, and half of his electorate goes with it too. And they fully believe that this man was chosen by God to make America great again, which gives him this sort of ultimate unhinged power in the eyes of a lot of the people that elected him. And that's, of course, terrifying to see as, first and foremost, Ukrainian, and secondly, European, and thirdly, also a person who I think that one of my biggest concerns, and you may agree or disagree, I'm actually very curious, is that American people don't necessarily know how to fight back for democracy because they have been so sheltered in having a democracy.
Um, Again, what is people per se, right? So in many cases, a person might not know what to do, and even might not to kind of to be fully aware that, for example, his rights are being replaced by something entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
But association of people, this is something different. And in the United States, you probably have one of the strongest NGOs anywhere, where it is possible to find a clear backbone of the societal um, structure, infrastructure of the United States. So basically, you would be able to be informed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're just in TikTok and this is the only media that you're consuming. So this might be more difficult to reach you. But but then again, I mean, even look, remember the first 16 to 20. There was a lot of criticism, to President Trump,
Mm-hmm.
especially during COVID. The way that he handled the COVID crisis, and that was one of the reasons why he lost. So I think it's again, I would repeat the same thing. It's not yet the time. I understand the concern. I'm concerned as well on many things. My concerns mostly are geopolitical, from where I stand. But let's see.
As I said before, and I'll repeat myself, I think that a lot of Americans will find this conversation soothing, because a lot of Americans, especially ones that I talk to, are in the apocalypse is coming mood. I think I'll give you a joke that happened in reality that kind of lifted my mood this morning. There was a bookstore, an independent bookstore in America, and it said that apocalyptic science fiction section has moved to current affairs. And
No, I mean, with this, I would probably then kind of agree with your previous statement. Is that as a Ukrainian, you should probably find yourself surrounded by people who are more optimistic than people that you talk to in the West. When it comes to me, one of the most, some of the most optimistic people I've found during my tenure as a minister were in Kiev. Even so in Kharkiv,
Yeah.
the city that is, bombarded every single day. Because these are the people who know the price that they are ready to
Yeah.
pay, who know what they need to do, how do they operate, and it's just a world apart. And in the Baltics, we're a bit closer, because for us, we know, we've seen, right? We've seen Ukraine, we've seen us, how we deal with it. And then yes, if you lived your whole life in absolute harmony, in peace, everything was taken care of, and you very, very seldom have to raise voice for something that is important to you, and that's mostly the issues that are very far from your home, not related to your everyday life. And then you suddenly figure out, okay, that's, I might need to say something, I might need to associate with some, organization to fight for something. Then you're freaked out. But honestly, I remember I had, one of my most memorable conversations I had with President Zelensky was when he was visiting Vilnius, and it was, I think, before Vilnius summit, so 2023, and I was doing a lot of work, trying to figure out the path forward to NATO summit, and it really did not look very, very good. And I thought I would use this opportunity. He came to Vilnius, he met my prime minister. I was in the delegation. I said, Mr. President, there are people who are, glass half full, there are, glass half empty. And at this stage, I feel like a person who is just, whose glass is just empty. And he says, do you want me to pour you some water? And it sounded like a, kind of a joke and a quick remark, which is a very characteristic of president, being able to,
Yeah, he's
to
quick-witted.
react fast. Yeah, he's quick-witted. And but the point is that I felt that it is hopeless. It's like climbing on a slippery wall. And he says, well, I can pour you some water, right? So your glass is fuller than you have sense.
Yeah.
So this is my point. If you're desperate, go to Ukraine. Not you, but your friends, who you talk to in United States. Check them out. Check how Ukrainians are living every freaking day, and for 3 years, and they still smile. They joke with you. They bear children. They bring children to school. Talk about hopeless. You are hopeless. You don't have trust for your future. Who are you talking to? Sorry, I'm in no position to talk about this. I just happen to know quite a lot of Ukrainians.
Yeah, no, it's everything is a matter of perspective, right? It's the same. It's sort of like I think a lot of Americans actually, when I talk to them, are scared of telling me what they're afraid of and their problems because they think that it's nothing compared to kind of what we live in. And I try to separate this because your fears are relative to what you're going through, but at the same time, I do
No, but
understand it. Sort of like I think it comes down
it's
to
healthy to remind.
yeah, I think it comes down to the willingness. I think it's more so that Americans understand that if democracy goes out of or gets out of hand, they will need to do something similar to what happened in Ukraine in Revolution of Dignity, and I don't think anyone feasibly really wants to find themselves in that position. So there is a lot of kind of like fear and anxiety. And again, Ukraine had to deal with this for decades, so it wasn't like a big surprise that we had to do this, right? We were conditioned to be like, okay, well, at some point we're going to have to suffer for democracy, right? I think Americans are now realizing they're going to have to suffer for democracy, and it's the first time in a very long time. So it's kind of 7 stages of acceptance, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, it's a best treatment, psychological treatment to visit Ukraine, and then you have a very easy way to compare yourself
Yeah, for sure.
and drink, kind of ask Ukrainians to fill your glass with some water.
Yeah, Ukraine itself, I guess, fills your glass with some water because I came here a year ago after 14 years of living in the United States, and I was supposed to visit and help and do some volunteer work, and then I went, took my dog, and moved. So so
Yeah.
now we're here. Well, so to conclude this, what is your sort? Again, it's hard to see the vision of what's going to happen because like, so many moving. It's like playing. Magnus Carlsen, the chess player who plays
Yeah, I
like
know.
20 boards at the same time, blindfolded. I feel like this is where we're at in terms of geopolitics. But What are your sort of ideas of where do we go from here, and what should people expect to see in the next 3 to 6 months on the geopolitical scene internationally?
Well, I'm absolutely convinced that the centrality. I mean, my core belief is in geopolitics that Ukraine is central to how the world will function. Whether we will move to a safer environment or to a more destructive and more dangerous and more unpredictable environment. Being able to to support Ukraine means that we are able to figure out the heaviest strategic questions of the 21st century. Failing to do that gives all the opportunities to to the aggressors, and this is where the two lines go from here. To figure out which one in the age of unpredictability requires this magic globe, whatever, kind of to see in the future. I don't know. I know what I can do. I know what needs to happen. I guess I know what needs to happen in order to get to the better path. I I believe that we can get there. We have the strength. Nothing is taken from us. We have all the strength. But there are certain elements that that worry me. That that we might not get there, or might not get there in time. That it would be too late to understand that what we were supposed to do. And knowing this, I just hope that whichever result appears, that looking back, I would know that I did my part. I did what I had to do with the limited instruments, limited understanding that I have, but still played a part. And I hope that everybody who is in position, any position, to convince, to write a letter, to make a decision, to make a vote, just to say something about something that is important, that they will do their part as well.
Do you think the European Union as a whole would step up to the United States if it swerved to a different path?
I don't have big hopes for European Union at this point in history. Europe is a is very well suited for peace, with slow reforms, slow debate, slow change. It makes us very stable, right? But then again, not very adaptable. If the environment changes in which we are, it changes faster. And Russia invading Ukraine changed the environment.
Yeah.
And and the time horizon, which is talked about in Brussels. Well, I don't think that we have that much time. 10, 20 years to prepare to get stronger. We needed that yesterday.
Yeah.
So can we at least hope that it happens in 2 years? I'm not so sure now.
I see.
So this is me being pessimistic. You see, I can do that as well.
I mean, to be fair, it just evened things out, you know? It's a balance. It's a healthy
Yeah,
balance.
yeah,
Well, thank
yeah.
you so much for coming to the channel and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate your insights, and I think everybody will as well, especially the Americans that can't afford therapy, because I think you just did that for them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you. I hope to see you here
thank
again
you.
soon. Bye. Enjoy
Yeah,
your day.
yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Take care.
Well, I hope that this conversation was as interesting to you as it was to me. And if you're American, well, hey, you're welcome for this free therapy session. I know I will be sending it to a couple of friends who are having a lot of emotions about this, and hopefully that'll give them some food for thought. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to hear more conversations like it, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and, of course, turn on your notifications so you don't miss when the next video comes out. And as per usual, give this video a like, share it with a friend, especially one who needs to hear this. And leave your thoughts, comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to read them. See you next time.